Okay, so I guess we have folks from the East Coast and folks from the West Coast in on this.
That's right.
Yeah, I'm actually a Midwest boy. I grew up um, in, in sort of rural Indiana. So I use that every once in a while. Every once in a while it works to my advantage to be just a farm boy from Indiana. And we can sort of work that in somehow
Yeah.
into how we communicate. Kind of
Yeah.
gives you an advantage sometimes.
Well, good. Hey, everyone, welcome. Thank you for joining Richard and I to talk about achieving your communication goals. We'll dive in real quick. I'd like to start by kind of sharing my story with Richard here. Um, there's a couple of things in my career that really just kind of shaped the direction of my career and helped, turn me into a better leader, better manager in the industry. And one of them is meeting Ole Thorderson. You know, he hired me when I was 18 years old, and I worked with him for 19 years. He's still the person I would consider my best friend, but he really gave me a ton of opportunities. And one of the ones that he surprised me with was F.I.R.S.T, and we'll get to that in a second. But um, another one that really kind of shaped and changed the direction of my career in that journey or transition from engineer to service manager to service executive was, joining the peer group, the True Profits peer group, with Steve Bowser, an inaugural member of his service executives peer group back in 2004. Uh, Probably the third thing on my list of things that changed my life would be discovering the book, The E-Myth, and Oli actually gave me an opportunity to go to an E-Myth workshop, kind of spend a weekend with Michael Gerber and just a small number of other people. But number four on the list is F.I.R.S.T, and Oli kind of surprised me and sent me to the first thing. I Richard and I were talking about it. It had to have been at least 20 years ago is when he sent me to this. And I'll tell you, F.I.R.S.T became one of those things. I think the way it kind of fell out is Ole went to the first workshop, probably on somebody's recommendation, and he thought, wow, this is good, and sent me and the two other leaders at Alvaca Networks to the workshop. And then for me, it became so impactful that every level three engineer that we had at Alvaca Networks, we would send to Richard's workshop. And as soon as I would promote any engineer from level two to level three, kind of first order of business was send them to the first workshop. And I kind of lost touch with Richard over the years. And I really was excited to reconnect with him recently. And I kind of floated the idea of coming to the C-level community with the F.I.R.S.T method. And he was kind of excited to do that. And I'm like just beside myself happy that Richard was able to join us to do this with the community. And then the fifth one is discovering ITIL, right? The IT Information Library, IT Service Management Best Practices. So with that, I'm going to pretty much hand the ball over to Richard to talk about, and really what today's about is sort of an intro to Richard and the F.I.R.S.T method. And at the end, we'll talk about a workshop offering that I was able to work out with Richard for our community. So I'm really looking forward to this. So Richard.
Well, thank you very much. Certainly, it's a pleasure to be here. And we were chatting just beforehand about East Coast, West Coast, and that we got everybody across the country. Pretty interesting. The other thing that I want to jump on was exactly what you were talking about, Rex, about influencers in your life. Um, Although I did grow up in a rural town in Indiana, my father worked in Chicago, kind of like a culturally rich area, and he was one of those guys that was in the early '60s. Was I guess anybody who's watched the Mad Men on TV, the advertising business was kind of the celebrity situation for the country. It was they were rock stars, and one of the things I had an opportunity to do was meet some of his spokespeople. And one of my earliest influencers was a guy by the name of Art Linkletter. And Art Linkletter, that's a long, long time ago. There he is. um, He was born in Moose Jaw, Canada, and is actually Canadian, and that's a pretty small town also. So um, one of the messages here is no matter where you're from, sometimes small towns, sometimes big towns, you can become a great communicator. He actually had the longest running daytime variety show in the history of radio and television. From 1945 to 1969, he was on the air. And I had a couple of opportunities to sit down with Art because my dad knew him. He was a spokesperson for, I think it was Quaker Oats or something at the time. And I spent one time almost 2 hours with him. He sat and talked to me. I couldn't have been any more than 13 or 14 years old. And you're sort of precocious at that time. So one of the things I asked him is, what made you successful? What made you successful? And he said, you know what, Richard? He says, I have no talent. I said, how can that be? You're on television, you're on the radio. He said, the only talent I have is the ability to build relationships with people by talking. Rex, in your business, are relationships important? Yeah. I was hoping to get a response from you.
Oh, sorry, I had muted so that there'd be no
Oh, you're
background noise. I
muted.
apologize. There you go. Mistake
Yeah.
number one. So, in our industry, many times I've heard people talk about commoditization, right? Like this goes back into the early 2000s when Dell acquired Silverback, right? And everybody started screaming, commoditization and managed services. And all along I've known there's no such thing as commoditization and managed services. Like the big powerhouses aren't going to be able to come in and take our clients away from us. And it's all because of the interpersonal relationships we have with our clients.
And the next question, do they, in order to maintain those relationships, did they need attention to sustain them?
Constant attention. I think that's why Facebook is so popular, right? Because we're able to have these relationships with friends from high school that we would never be able to have if we didn't have. And why is it so popular?
Yeah, this webinar is a form of sustaining your relationships with the people that you work with, and I commend you for what you're doing. So, but I want to start off with what we all have heard the phrase relationship management, and I guess that's how you sustain a relationship is you manage it. What does it really mean? And when I started to think about it, I said, I want to split it apart. Let's talk about relationships. There's a whole bunch of different kinds of relationships you can talk about, but there's something very unique about the word relationship. And that is, you can't have a relationship of one. Can't have a relationship with one. The sun has a relationship with the earth. The moon has a relationship with. So we're not just talking about people, but the word relationship demands that it's a two-way street. And I want to keep that in mind as I go through and tell you a little bit about this first communication, workshop, because that's one of the keys to it. The other key is, of course, management. And for years and years, I've been in the business consulting and management business, training senior managers, working with them, putting on workshops. And in all these years, one definition of management seems to be almost universal and works in every situation. And that definition is, and you might want to make a note of this because I asked Rex when we started communicating again a couple of months ago, what if he remembered what the definition of management was, and he was able to recall it. It took him a minute, so I think it's impactful enough that you might want to write it down. Management is simply controlling for the outcome you desire. Whatever thing you want to manage, if you want to manage a relationship, yeah, you really do want to control it for what you desire. And there's nothing wrong with that. You can have great relationships with people, but they become more valuable to both of you when you realize that you got to get outcomes from it. So controlling for the outcome you desire, you can, when you use that management word, if you're managing a project, you can figure out what the result you want from the project is. If you're, managing your travel, it's all the same. It's controlling for the outcome you desire. So let's keep those two concepts in mind as I go through the different kinds of relationships that we're all used to. Let's talk first about workers and co-workers. And it's been said that the worker-co-worker relationship is one of the most underrated relationships. Why do you think that might be? I'm going to answer some of these questions rhetorically, but Rex, if you want to jump in and offer an answer every once in a while, that would be fine. But for the answer for that is because
Richard,
we spend so much time at work.
Richard, if I could jump in real quick, I am monitoring the chat and the Q&A features of
Okay.
the webinar. So if anybody has a thought that they want to share, just go ahead and throw it in there, and I'll break in with Richard. So
Good. Fine. So worker co-worker relationship, we spend so much time before it, maybe not so much in the last year away from our homes, but away from our homes with our co-workers. And we develop deep relationships and learn to trust them and work with them, and they help us accomplish things. So according to surveys, it's one of the most underrated relationships when people are asked about relationships. We can have it two ways too. Here we got a little depiction here of what happens if you're not getting along with your coworker. I'm sure that every one of you have had an instance where you had a terrible coworker, one who was counterproductive to you or counterproductive to everyone else, and we know how deeply it affects your work, your work and your personality. So the relationship is extremely important. When we have a good coworker, there's the prompt. We're all smiles. Makes a tremendous difference, not just in our work life, but in our personal life. So, we see that, we experience it. It's something that we all have in common. And let's go for a minute into thinking about how you manage that. How do you manage it? If your worker is your coworker is having a bad day, you probably tiptoe around it. If your coworker is overwhelmed, you probably reach out to him and try to see if you can help in any way. Communication is the key to maintaining and sustaining a decent relationship with your coworkers. You can't leave it alone. Any of you have experienced it and tried to leave it alone, you can see it doesn't get better. Let's go also now to the next one, which we're talking about. How do we manage a relationship between vendor and customer? Okay, ordinarily when you sit down at the table in order to buy something, and I'm using that metaphorically, when you sit down at the table, as you sit down at the table, you're sitting there, and if you're buying something and somebody else is selling something, there's no confusion about whether you're the buyer or the seller. I'm in this situation to buy, and the other person's in the situation to sell. Take the car sales, which we all hate. The car salesman. You're sitting down, at least At least you know that you're the buyer and that person's the seller. I'll throw out a question for you. Who do you think needs to succeed more in that relationship? Most people answer that question. Most people answer that question, well, the seller. I mean, he's got to sell, that's his job. Let me put this out to you. If you've ever bought a car, it's not a pleasant experience. And when you go in, you want the you want to be able to buy it seamlessly. You want the price you want the features you want, you want to succeed. It's a big deal in your life to buy a car. So you need to succeed just as much as the other person does, just as much as the guy selling it. Now, so what happens in that situation? What happens in that situation is most often the guy selling thinks that he needs to rule the roost, to make it happen, and it drives away the person who wants to buy if they're too aggressive. How do you manage it? Start thinking in terms of the next time you're in that kind of a situation, how do you manage it? If you're buying something that's easier, you just I need a new speaker. I bought a new speaker for webinars and Zoom meetings, so people can hear me more clearly. When I went in there, we knew who the buyer and the seller was. We knew what we wanted. The transaction went easy, and we were both happy. Let's take a look at what happens when you get to the next level. Want to move to the buyer seller negotiations. When you instigate a negotiation, it only happens when you're not in agreement. When you're not in agreement, I want something, I found out that you want something else, and we're sort of at loggerheads. To understand what makes it, how you manage this relationship, I want to focus on the word negotiation. The root word for negotiation comes from Latin, and it's the first three letters, neg, negate. Almost all negotiation courses for many years were built on, I have to negate your position in order to get my way. How should we manage a negotiation? We should manage a negotiation with the attitude that instead of negating the other person, I'll use Lowe's store's famous ad is, let's build something together. The next time you go into a negotiation, when things are going fine and all of a sudden we're not, we're on different points of view, start to think in terms of, how do we bring this together? What things do we have in common? That's how you manage the buyer-seller negotiations, even when you get into a situation where you want one thing and they want others. You guys are all probably very aware of the phrase value engineering. Think about it in these terms from now on. How do I value engineer? Could we come together by value engineering? I'm speaking of like price, it's the difference. Well, how could I get the things that I want and you still get what you want by value engineering it? That's just an example of how you would manage a relationship where the negotiation becomes a tug of war. Let's move on a little bit and talk something about domestic. When I first started to do this deep dive into communication and to understanding that the core of communication is kind of managing relationships. When I did that deep dive, one of the things I did is I decided to, start reading up on some of it. So I go to, pulled articles off of Google, or Ask Siri a question. But I also wanted to go, went to the old Barnes and Noble, right? And I'm walking through there, and I went there. I said, where would I find some good books on relationships? And she said, well, there's aisle 6, 7, and 8. Okay, I go over there, and I go to aisle 6, 7, and 8, and it's crazy. I mean, there's aisle after aisle, book after book about relationships, but it's not the relationships where it's rarely the business relationship. The number one focus of most relationships, let's face it, is between domestic, between adults, the love relationship, the Venus and Mars. And if you think about it, isn't that, that's a good start to think about how you manage a relationship between adults, even if it's a business relationship. Let's go back, and it's how you relate to each other. And no, let's it's how you relate to each other. And if we think about the word relationship again, relationship, there's no relationship of one. It has to be a two-way street. Has to be a two-way street. If you think you're going to get your way or manage your relationship and don't recognize that it's two-way street, you're going to fail. Maybe Frank Sinatra can say, I did it my way, but we're not all Frank Sinatras. And so it's very much a two-way street. I'm gonna give you a little example of it. Is I had in my workshop one time an engaged couple, and we break off into teams and so forth, and so we happened to be, there were 3 teams at the time, and one was on one team and one was on the other, so they could, learn a little bit more about each other as we went through the workshop. So I said, can anybody give me an example of a miscommunication? And he raises his hand and says, yeah, the other day, my fiance and I, we are in a situation where I get up early in the morning and I have to go to my work, and she gets up a little bit later, and then she comes home, later, and we keep missing each other. And I said, yeah, that's everybody's life in today's world. And he said, but the other day I had a really good idea. My idea was that I was going to leave her a nice little note, and then she'd be happy and everything. And when I came home later on, and after she'd been home, maybe I got the who goes which way first out of order here. But when I came home, instead of having her bounding to the door and giving me hugs and kisses, I hear sobbing. And I go, honey, and the sobbing seems to be coming from the room. And I walk over the room, and I said, honey, what's the matter? And she goes, get away from me. I don't want to talk to you. I mean, you don't love me anymore. And I said, well, what do you mean? And I said, and then I spoke up and I said, Bill, what did you put on the note? And he said, I just put on the note, we need some alone time. Uh-oh. I said, what did you mean? I meant we should have some time together, right? And I said to her, well, what did you think? I thought he wanted to break up with me. So one of the ways of managing communication is making sure you figure out first. I said, maybe you could have put a little heart on the note or something like that, or said, let's go. He meant that they were going to, go out to have a romantic dinner, and it took, an entire day to clarify it. So when we're managing, don't think that the other person, don't assume that the other person knows what it is that you want. A two-way street means you put signs on it, that there is, they understand that it's not just going to be a one-way street. And if you don't, if it's my way or the highway, um, I think probably everybody within hearing distance of me can recognize the times in their lives when, when they decided it's my way or the highway, and they probably are recovering from the fallout from treating it that way. A relationship requires the two-way street. Let's now talk about one of my favorites here. The next one. Okay, so there's the bad side of it. All right, this is I assume that a number of people that can hear my voice now. This is domestic between adult and child. I assume that many of you have children, or have had children, or you're at some stage of being interfacing with them. Completely different than adults. What happens, when well, I used to like to say, a child, from the time that they can really start communicating with you as a toddler, as a baby, from say 1.5 or 2 to 12, it's there. Sometimes you have to discipline them, but there's one thing that both of you agree on, and that is that you are the center of their life. They know they have to depend on you. They know that their world revolves around you, to be fed, to go from here to there, to take you to give it soccer practice, to do that. They may complain and things like that, but they still have absolute certainty that you're the center, as a parent, that you're the center of their universe from 2 to 12. Anybody who's experienced a 13-year-old, boy or girl, all of a sudden, at some point in life, there's an enormous change. A 12-year-old has been educated, is one of the nicest people in the world. If you remember, they're conversational, they like you, they realize that, and things are going along great. And then all of a sudden, 13 years old comes, and it's like an alien comes out of their body, and the alien looks like this young lady here. Huh. How did school go today? Right? They stop communicating with you. What do? People struggle with this. And one of the reasons they struggle with it is because I think they forget that what they want and what the child wants are probably no longer on the same rail. Who's their influencer now? Their number one influencers in the life of a 12, 13, 14-year-old, no, excuse me, of a 13, 14, or 15-year-old, we all know, are the other 13, 14, and 15-year-olds who know more than they do. So instead of having anchor, they are their influencers. And sometimes it goes on long beyond that. How do you manage that relationship? What were some of the things you tried, Rex?
Oh my gosh, I have succeeded and I have failed.
Right. You succeeded and you failed, but you tried. You
Yes,
tried, and that's the key to it all, isn't it? You try.
I think I've done better between Robin and I. We've we're our seventh child is now 13, so this is really hitting home for me right now.
Yeah, and here's and this is something that we should carry forward in all of our communication things. Is remember that two-way street. Remember, where's that person coming from? What's their world like? It took me till I think my third one to really break through that. my ordinary conversation with my 13-year-old daughter would be, so tell me about your friends at school. They're fine. What do you guys like to do? Hang out. You know, like 2-word answers. And then, even though I hate to shop, I'm not a shopper. I know that she loved clothes and she liked to shop and she liked to go to the mall. And so, out of the blue, one day, I just said, honey, I think you need some new outfits. Let's go to the mall. Oh, Daddy, I love you. Let's go to the mall. I want to get hugs around my legs and everything. I take her to the mall, and I spent 2 hours in one store while she went in and out on changing her clothes and coming out in new outfits. I learned everything about her life in that 2 hours. She told me about her friends and this boy that she didn't like and that boy that she liked, and just blew up the communication. Lesson. Lesson. If you want to get what you want, when somebody else um, wants something else, you're the one who must change. You have to change. And we have this symbol here. Everybody probably knows what that is. That's the infinity symbol, which means what goes around comes around. If I make it about you, and this transfers to every one of these other relationships we're talking about. If I make the discussion, the questions, or if I get on your wavelength, if I make it about you, it's going to come back to me. And if you don't make it about the other person, it's not. You can't have your way or the highway. And so the parents that, kind of give up, they give up sort of, and they have a tough time because they want it to be the way it used to be. Right, Rex?
Yeah,
When
absolutely.
you realize, go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
Yeah. And so when you realize that, it takes humility. You're no longer the center of their world. Take it to any one of the relationships I've talked about so far, the worker coworker. Somebody's always in a bad mood. Why? What's their world like? Maybe they got something terrible going on in their home life. Maybe you could ask them about it. What's going on? Find out something about their lives. What goes around comes around. If you want to get something from somebody else, you better make it about them. We got one more on our original list of relationships that we wanted to really explore, and I think it's a good one. It's kind of fun. Um, Student teacher relationship. When I have a live class and I ask this question, I said I would ask, um, who do you think's in your mind? Who do you think's more dominant in this relationship? Who's the dominant person in the student teacher relationship? Some people, most I'll say right away, most say, well, the dominant one is the teacher because they're just leading the other person along. Um, a few will say the student, and have some answer for it. Um, but here's the answer. Here's the real answer, and it comes from a short story here, and that is, um, there's every year there's a National Teacher of the Year award in public schools, and for grade schools, middle school, high school, and they're nominated by the school system, or they're nominated by the principal up through the school system and so forth, and they're vetted, but they finally decide on a teacher of the year in each of these levels. And the prize is, like, it's not the Nobel Prize, but it's 50 or $100,000 prize, and a lot of publicity, and a lot of fun, and they've been doing it since 1952. Since 1952, of course, if you're an educator, you want to find out things about what makes these teachers great. And so they've studied them and so forth. And since 1952, more than 90% of the National Teachers of the Year answered these three questions in the same way. How do you teach? The first answer, and the first answer was by the best teachers. I skipped the part. The part that I skipped was that they all answered saying the student is the dominant person. Without the student, I have no job. My whole focus is on the student. The way I teach is formed by how the student reacts. And so they all answered how they taught in the following way. Number one, I try to inspire my students with questions, not with statements. Oh, that's as old as Socrates. It's called the Socratic method. The best teachers asked questions of their students to inspire. What else do you do that makes you a great teacher? I listen. When I ask the question, I listen to my students to measure their two things: their level of engagement and their level of understanding. Two completely different things. When you have sometimes great students get lost in a class because they understand everything right away, but they become unengaged. So listening, the great teacher says, that tells me how to teach that student. It comes from them. They are the dominant. So when we start thinking about communication, isn't that really true all the way through? Communication, don't you need to listen more than you speak? That's why we have two ears and one mouth, in order to really figure things out. Because if we go in with just our agenda, it's going to mess things up. Let's go to number 3. Inspire, listen. Number 3, guide. They still have the responsibility. If the student doesn't fully understand, to go back a step and help them, give them extra time, and guide them to in the right direction. Don't tell them. Ask them rhetorical questions that are obvious. Think about, so if you were going to do that, what do you think would happen? The rhetorical question is the other question that they use, all the great teachers used over time. So as I read that was one of the most impactful things as I started to almost 20 years ago. I don't think it was quite 20 years ago, Rex. I think because we're only in 2021, that would make it, 2001. I think you were in the class of 4 or 5 or something like that. But 20 years ago, when I started to, put together from all my consulting and so forth, and from my time that I spent with Art Linkletter, that he says, I don't have any talent except my ability to talk to and listen to people. Wow, that's what you got to do. So as I started to do it, I created a workshop, and this is part of what the first workshop is going to be about. We're going to use questions to learn about people, to learn about what their interests are, to, to learn about what their issues are. We're going to learn about, what we call them foundation questions. We call them foundation questions. What's their life like? So that you can break the ice a little bit, so that you can kind of earn the right to continue the conversation. Then we're going to use another kind of questions. We're going to use another kind of question. That's issue questions. It's nice to know that you had a great upbringing and you like horses, and but that may not get you where you want to get to. So I also want to find out about your issues. What are the things that are important to you? What are you trying to accomplish? What do and you can put this in any one of your relationship areas. You want to find out a little bit more than just the warm and fuzzies. You want to find out about the things that they care about that may relate to where you want to go. And then we have the R question, the results questions. You want to ask that rhetorical question. Okay, if you don't do this, what's going to happen? Or if you do that, what have you considered? What other things? Some people call that finding the pain. Some of this is of what we learned in the first method is you've heard before because it works. The solution questions, they're what they are is they're the safety net. So let me tell you what I think I've heard. Let me tell you what I think I've heard from you in this discussion. And you don't have to put it in those words, but that's where you want to go to. You want to emphasize that you've been listening, and then you already know then what their needs are. So if what I want could match with, could help you with your issues, and think in terms of your business now, what I've heard from you could match with what your issues are. Would it make some sense for us to work something out? Yeah, it would. We don't ever change anybody's mind. Even in the greatest communication, you'll never change somebody's mind. They change their own mind based upon the relationship that you've built. And the final part of the first method is teaming. Now you can assume we're on the same team. And so everything that we talk about, I'm listening more to you and trying to see how it fits exactly what I might have to offer you. And it can be in any communication. This can be you want to go on a vacation to one place and your wife wants to go on a vacation to another place. You can make it happen. You can both be satisfied if you've been listening good. Compromise is a part of it. But once you form the same team, now you're going in the same direction. And it doesn't turn back. And I think I hope by what I've said today, most of you can see, how powerful this could be. And before I end, I'm going to tell you one thing. The primary tool for managing your relationships is, of course, communication. Here's how we do it in the first method, effective communication workshop. We can, Rex, we can go over to I think we have a bullet point thing.
Yeah,
what we're going to produce.
Before we go there, Richard, I'd like to ask you a quick question.
Sure.
And when I first came to this workshop, I thought I was coming to something about solution selling. and I learned that it was something very different as I went through the workshop. Can you kind of expand on that a little bit? Sure.
I mean, solution selling takes out the emotion. You're totally focused only on the solution. And so many times you'll zero in, and I think all of you can remember this happening to you. You'll zero in on what you now think is the solution, and it's totally off base. And it also, in solutions selling, you're totally focused on your solution. When in the first workshop, we create a communication goal, but it's always keeping in mind the two-way street that that exists. You have to find out more than just solution selling. Really starts with what I would call, Rex, the issue questions. I'm gonna find out what your needs are, and I'm gonna show you how my solution fits your needs. It's the other way around. I want to hear about your needs, and then I need to find out how I might be able to help you. And sometimes, just sometimes, it's that I can't directly help you, but I may give you some suggestions that, to where you can get help. And that kind of mindset, which is the first method mindset, is, I don't want to tell you what to do. I want to find some way to help you. And so the foundation questions in the first method are extremely important. And then, of course, all five of them are. You can't. I use the first method every day with almost everyone I have communication with. When I recommunicated with you, Rex, you started to giggle a little bit. He doesn't giggle much, but he smiled and said, "All right, I see what's going on." He went right through, so Richard, don't people get defensive when they see you're using this methodology? First of all, if you do it right, you're just caring about them. Secondly, is, so what? People love it when you're concerned about them, and it builds relationships.
So I've got two follow-on questions. One, and Richard and I did not talk about this, so I may surprise him a little bit here, but you told a story about how at the DMV you used the first method to get some help. Do you remember that one? And then the second question I wanted to get out was, why would somebody want to send an engineer through the program?
Well, I'll take the low-hanging fruit first. Why would you want to send an engineer to the program? Because engineers solve problems, and that's it's first and foremost on their mind, and they solve the perceived problem. You'll find out in the workshop we do role plays, and role plays have twists to them. And what you think is the problem, you can get way off base and be offering, things that don't need to be offered. One example I use for that is, in the early days, I'll go back 10 or 15 years ago, whenever somebody had some new software, they wanted to do a demo. We're going to have our demo, right? And you'd go through an hour of demo, and one person just wanted to see some segment of what wanted to see some segment of it, but everybody wanted to put on their full demo, and people would tune out and say, I'm just done here, right? So that's one. I think that's the engineer one. I'll have to be honest. I'm not 100% sure that I can remember the DMV one, but it would certainly include, after I've waited a long time in line and I get to the front, the first thing that I would say would not be, "God, this just sucks." I'd say, "Wow, looks like you're really busy today. Okay. How can I help you to be a shorter client?" So that might be something, but I don't remember the whole thing. If you remember it, spark my memory.
Well, I don't remember the whole thing. The thing that really came away for me was, I'm not trying to just sell somebody to buy something from me. In this case, you were trying to influence this person to want to help you with the problem.
Yes, but first goes with, you got to get a mindset is, I want to help you. I want to help you in some way. There's a famous line, I think it was in, I don't remember this movie, but help me to help you. Help me to help you. And yeah, if you're if you're single-minded and you're looking at when we even set goals, we set goals very carefully. We set the communication goal. That's one of the things that you're going to get out of the workshop. We learn how to set goals that we start out with what's the best possible result that you could get from the communication you're about to have. And then you create also an alternative goal, which you still consider to be a success. It's if that's the only thing you got out of the workshop, it'll move you ahead at light speed in terms of your ability to communicate with other people.
Thank you, Richard.
So, do we have a final? Yeah.
Yeah.
So just here's the commercial. Here's what the workshop's about. It's a 1 to 3/4 day. We start early. We do a big full day the first day, and then the second day, and we learn all about it. And we go through the F.I.R.S.T and how to ask those questions and how to learn. But before we even do that, we don't even go into the F.I.R.S.T part until we've set the groundwork. Some of the things, this is one, what we went through the relationship management page is about 1 out of about 13 pages where you're really examining the fundamentals of what communication is and why it works with people. So it takes 1 to 3. You learn, you internalize, it's interactive. Pre-workshop 360, this is one of the favorite things for people. Before, in anticipation of the workshop, we will send you out a questionnaire, and excuse me, we will ask you for people who to give us email addresses to people who will be willing to give you answers to 6 questions about you, and you will not know about it until we get to the workshop. You will not know the answers till we get to the workshop. People love to see how other people perceive them, and we call it a snapshot 360. Many of you have been through something like that before, but we use only 6 questions, and we do it in a very positive format when you come back to the group. In terms of how we can improve our communications. Don't be afraid of the questionnaire. There's very little negativity to it. We do role plays with twists, and we work on teams, 3 people to a team, and you each get a different role play, and you assess each other's, and then we have a self-assessment exercise. I told you about the communication goal setting. And then we do practice. We put it all together and practice again in role plays to succeed, to learn how to succeed 100% of the time. The final thing is we do a peer participation roundtable, which you get feedback from everybody that you've worked with for the last almost 2 days. And that's very enlightening. People love that. They get to hear, you create bonds with other people. Did you maintain any? I mean, there's other people that you went to in the workshop. Did you ever?
I don't know.
I
I do
think
know that I still have my first method workbook. I don't have very many things on the shelf behind me, but I do still have this workbook from, I'm not even sure
we
when.
get a better copy of it now.
Yeah.
That's but it's a lot of fun. It is great fun. I mean, you bond with the people in the workshop, and we do it. So thank you guys for all the time. I hope you got something out of this, and if you're interested, I'd love to see you in the workshop.
So I will tell you, Richard normally charges $17.95 for this workshop. It would normally be in person. I pulled out my first method and used it on Richard a little bit and got him to agree to a $9.95 price. But I'm just, again, excited that we can bring this to the C-level community. It's a 2-day workshop. It's going to be a long first day and a shorter second day. We've scheduled it for end of April. It is limited to 12 people because there are 4 groups of 3. That there's a ton of role play that goes on, and I'm really looking forward to, kind of helping Richard facilitate this workshop. So there's a registration link down there, and I will be sending this recording off to everybody that registered with the link in there. So don't worry about too much about trying to grab it. But I'm hoping to see you guys take advantage of this. Like I said, it was one of the top 5 or the 4th most impactful thing in my personal career. So I'm still watching for any Q&A if anybody has any.
So Rex, I think Rex is going to, we're going to make this the Zoom version of this. We can go off in groups, and I don't think that we're going to lose very much by not having it in person, because I know that Rex is really good at this, creating it, and I think we'll just have a lot of fun with it.
Do you have a rough estimate of the number of people that have gone through your first method workshop?
More than 2,000. More than 2,000. And most of them are still in contact with, either through LinkedIn or something else. For a while, we had alumni gatherings, every year. These people like to exchange stories and so forth. It becomes a part of your life, just like it did you, Rex.
I kind of envision that owners, might come to this first one, and a similar thing might happen, right? Where they say, "Oh, I need my service exec or my sales manager or salespeople to go through this." And when your service manager goes through it, they'll probably feel the same way I did, which is we need to get our engineers that are involved in consulting with our clients, right? Everybody complains that engineers are too technical when they're talking to our clients, and I think this first method was one of the breakthrough moments for me to really make the client the center of the solution, and in the way I discussed it with them. And I suspect that a lot of you guys will see a similar thing. It's like, if you want to grow your engineers and grow your staff, this is something that should be game changing for them.
Thanks again. Appreciate it. Hope to see some of you, at least see some of you virtually, right?
Allie's asking if we would recommend this for salespeople too.
Oh, you know what? I did a total sales version for a while. A lot of people saw it that way. This is dynamite, because you get them out of their regular, sales communication or sales training zone into where they understand it's another aspect of communication, and you can be more effective by following this methodology.
Awesome. And still looking for questions. We could probably hang out another minute or two. Any feedback? Anybody think that this sounds interesting? Or, I'm happy to have some personal one-on-one discussions about it with anybody. Because again, I'm just trying to impress as much as I can that this was really important to me in my career.
Yeah, I should give them a direct, a link to me also. We didn't put it up there. It's great to go through you, but again, some question that maybe I would be more qualified to answer, than Rex. Rex is handling all the signups and everything, but so anybody who my direct line is 949.
Is it Richard at firstlcs.com?
Correct. Richard at firstlcs.com.
And 949?
949-233-2306. Like all of you, I probably won't answer a call that I don't recognize, but I'll call you back.
That's in, I just put it in the chat for everybody.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Awesome. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, and I'll promote anybody that's still in the meeting to a panelist, and maybe we can just chat for a couple minutes.
Do you want me to stay on, Rex?
Yeah, if you can.
Okay.